Hey there, we are back and reading Chapter 10, The New Family. In establishing a new adoptive family, it is necessary to distinguish between the process for a newborn and that for an older child. In this chapter, I will make recommendations to adoptive parents who are adopting newborns. Many of those suggestions will be relevant to any adoptive relationship, but some modifications are recommended for families adopting older children. These will be discussed in the next chapter. And I will also, as an adoptee, make recommendations as well. And I will have more resources for young children. I am gaining more resources. I just ordered a few more books. And I'll be checking out the library as well. So I'll have books for the younger crowd as well. I'll be doing readings. So if that'll help you guys. All right. Continuing on. Bringing home baby. Once the baby is in his new home, it is important for the adoptive parents to follow some guidelines to help the attachment and bonding process. Eye contact is very important. A baby should always be held while being fed, with eye contact being maintained throughout. Skin-to-skin contact is also important between infant and mother, so that they can begin to feel more secure with the new scent, energy, and heartbeat in a calm, loving atmosphere. Touch is a basic need of all babies. At this early phase, infants learn about people and objects through sensory perception and intuition. For babies who do not respond to cuddling, it is essential to find ways to touch them in loving ways that is non-threatening. There are people who specialize in baby massage. I would recommend that parents seek one out in order to learn some techniques which will allow the baby to accept touch without feeling threatened. Certain games which foster touch can be another means of doing this. So if you guys don't know, I am a parent. My son is biological. I am the adoptee, but that is something that I did with him, skin to skin. We would cuddle together. Obviously I'd feed him, but I would also do the sensory massages. We still do them, even though he's 9. On his hands, on his back, on his feet, and it really is just relaxing, and he still loves it. Still loves it to this day. Me, on the other hand, I will say I would prefer the back, but I get very sensitive to touches. Very sensitive. So, I don't know if that's something, my APs were very good about trying to attach without over-forcing it, but I'm very sensitive to touch. Anyway, parents should not mistake a child's reluctance to accept cuddling for a lack of need of closeness and touching or a rejection of them. The child needs touch, but may not trust it. It is up to the parents to devise ways to make sure that there is no deficit in this area. Some children provoke spankings to fulfill the requirement of touch. If a child seems calmer after a spanking, it is probably because they managed to get their quota of touching without becoming vulnerable, not because they feel the need to repent. Repentant? Because this kind of touching sets up for an equation where touch is also a punishment for negative behavior. This form of touching sets a bad precedent. A child who does not respond positively to cuddling is only trying to defend themselves against further wounding, and it has nothing to do with the parents personally. They need to accept this, remain sensitive to their child's messages, and find ways which are non-threatening to give affection. So yeah, first of all, don't spank your children. There's no need. If your child is too young to, communicate with in that manner, then timeouts. Actually, I prefer time-ins, but timeouts work. If they are able to communicate, then why are you spanking them anyway? Whether your child is biological or adoptive, there is no need for spanking. Even in the most egregious behaved children, so meaning their behavior is bad, but not the child, there's something else going on, and you need to help that. Spanking, hitting, abuse is not the answer. I'm not saying spanking is abuse. I'm just saying it can lead there, and it is not the answer. Anywho, how to handle loss. Parents of babies and toddlers adopted at birth or later will want to be alert to unexplained sadness or crying, which might be expressions of the child's loss of the biological mother. Remember that some psychologists believe that children up to the age of 2 or 3 can remember their birth, relinquishment, and adoption. It would be important to empathize with the loss and to talk about it, but put it into words for them. If the child cries and refuses to let their adoptive mother comfort them, perhaps they are remembering their first mother and would benefit from someone saying so. Something like, "You must miss her, sweetheart," or some understanding phrase would do. The adoptive mother is certainly the nurturing mother, but she will never take place of the birth mother, and even if she feels threatened by this, she needs to let the child know that she understands their loss. Also important would be noticing the adoptee's reactions to present loss, the death of a pet, or to someone to whom they felt close, or moving to a new community, leaving friends, etc. Do they acknowledge the loss, or do they act as if it doesn't matter? Translation: it would be too overwhelming to do so. Not only might the child be experiencing the immediate loss, but the first loss as well. It is helpful to remember that the vague loss left by adoptee is confined to the loss of the mother. Is not confined by the loss of the mother, but also to the loss of part of themselves, or the self. It is reported to feel something like phantom limb pain or death. One of the things that adult adoptees tell me when they get to the point where they can put into words their very early feelings is that they felt as if they had died, that the person they are is not the same person who was born to their first mother. Death and losing the mother are often confused by the child. Usually, in this confusion, the child feels as if losing the mother, death of the soul, is their own fault. The biological mother, whether overtly acknowledged or not, is a very real part of the adoptee's emotional life. This is one reason that it is important to be allowed to talk about her. Parents should communicate in a sensitive manner any information they have about the birth mother or birth father when the child asks about them. Talking freely about them helps to keep the fantasies at bay. I don't disagree with that. I think there will always be fantasies, but it will also help the child feel at ease knowing that the adoptive parents are more secure in the relationship, which will then not come into the relationship between the adoptive parent and the child. It will help lessen the need for doing things like sending them off, because of behavior. So the adoptive parent needs a lot of work. A lot. But no, I had all that information and I still fantasized. So I would say probably if you're open adoption and more of a co-parenting situation, it would be less fantasy. But I don't think the fantasies will ever not be there, if that makes sense. Continuing on. And promotes an atmosphere of honesty and trust between the adoptee and their adoptive parents. In any case, it is my opinion that the child should be told about their adoption at an early age, even before they understand the words. That's so true. There needs to be an openness about it, because they already know about it. Yes, we already know even if we're not told, and if we're not told, it becomes an even bigger problem if we find out later in life. So, always keep it open, always be open and honest, but also don't demonize the first parents. Even if they did wrong, do not discuss that in a judgmental way. Let the child decide. Okay? Just let the child decide. Don't say anything harmful about them. They were there just because they were not able to consciously remember it. Doesn't mean it didn't actually affect them. Telling about adoption. While it is important to talk about adoption from an early age, it is equally important to remember that intellectually, adoption is an adult, complex concept, which the child will not understand for some time. One should start with the birth and go from the simple to the complex. It is crucial not to lie and bring the ideas naturally into the conversation. It goes without saying that the parents should be the ones to tell, and that they should at the same time convey love, honesty, permanency, which doesn't mean that the child will be able to accept that in any way. Agree. That they should be free to discuss adoption all of their life because it is a lifelong process. 1000% true. The goals are both telling and understanding, and both must be completed. Some of the questions which might come up are in the nature of the adoptive family relationships, the nature of the adoption process, the parents' motives for adopting, the parents' reasoning for relinquishing, and sometimes the adoptees appear to be disinterested in their adoption. This is a defense. They are very interested. So true. I hear many adoptees be like, well, it doesn't really bother me, or I didn't really go seeking. Is because they're scared or they're not out of the fog, which is what we're talking about. And that's just as harmful. I bet they're going through questioning and things like that, but they're afraid to let it be known because they're afraid to hurt their adoptive parents, and that's just as hurtful to them. So, anyway, parents need to not put off any defensive attitudes, but should proceed in a sensitive, gentle manner. There is a sequence of telling which I had first heard at a workshop in Berkeley, California in 1985, which was sponsored by Parenting Resources of Tustin, California, and the Post-Adoption Center for Education Research, which is known as PACER, in the San Francisco Bay Area. It may act as a guide for parents. First 3 years, the explanation should be kept simple. The child may believe that everyone is adopted. In kindergarten, the child knows that they did not grow up in the adoptive mother's womb. Differences between them and the parents are all right, transracial, etc. The child may want to see where they come from, aka the agency or the hospital, and they may need answers to other questions like, where did you get that red hair? And the answer is usually from my family. Ages 8 through 11, the concept of adoption broadens. The child has a unique status. They may become more overtly frightened about losing their family and needs to have permanency reaffirmed. This is best done by action, not words. And there should certainly never be any threats of abandonment, such as, if you can't do better in school, we will send you to boarding school. Or, we can't tolerate that behavior, we may have to put you in a treatment center. Any threats to abandon, which these are, so far as the child is concerned, only serve to raise anxiety level, causing any acting out behavior to become more blatant and unacceptable. The child may have some fantasies about their birth family and may ask about it. They need as much honest information as available. Let them be the one to ask what kind of information they want, because that is the information they are ready to hear. And then there's the teens. The adolescents will be able to understand the law the birth family has signed away, and about sex and relationships. They will have more understanding about their parents' reasoning for choosing to adopt. There should be openness in discussing infertility. The adolescent adoptee will need more information about their biological family as it becomes more and more apparent that they have no long-term history with the people with whom they are living with. Clues to their own identity will be important to them. It may be that he will begin to think about searching during the stage of development. In transracial adoptions, the adoptee will need information about their heritage and should have access to appropriate role models. This may come before adolescence because of the conflicts about the identity. It becomes more acute during this stage. So, mirroring heritage, even if the heritage is similar to yours, or maybe it's not similar to yours, but they may look like you, but their heritage is different. So, for example, for me, I'm Apache, and mix of European descent, but mostly Apache. But my heritage that I've grown up around is mostly from my adoptive parents, right? And theirs is not the same. And that's okay, but I really needed my Apache side to be more mirrored to me. Now, yes, they did try, but it wasn't easy. Parents should examine their own prejudices. It should never be assumed that parents who adopt minority children have no prejudices. My goodness. Treating a black child who is growing up in a predominantly white community as if he were white or they are white is a kind of racism because it denies the child the right to be who they are. Remember that biracial children, especially black-white, frequently consider themselves and are considered by society to be black. They will often identify more with their black culture than with their white, and need the opportunity to do that. White couples who have no black friends should think twice about adopting a black or biracial child. At all ages, parents must tell the truth about adoption and deal with the reality. As Nancy says in this book, that adoptive parents need to realize that their own feelings towards it and, jealousy, and I usually find this more in the adoptive mother, is problematic, and they need to solve that. They need to go through therapy because it's not about them as a parent, it is about the child. And the child needs to be heard, and the child needs the truth. So if you are adopting, or if you have adopted and have yet to tell your child, no matter the age, you need to sit them down right now. Well, right now as in as quickly as possible, and tell them. And this will cause issues. I am just going to warn you, because not only have you held that back, but they're going to already know, and it's going to cause mistrust. So if you don't do it now, they will find out in the future anyway and still distrust you. Might as well do it now. Come to terms with it. Give them all the information and help them through it, because that is major. Anywho, acknowledgement of differences. Part of the reality of acknowledging the difference between an adoptive and biological family, it is important to find a balance between denying the differences and insisting on the differences. Someone has come up with a curve which might serve as a guideline for parents listing 5 categories of differences: the instance of difference, the assumption of difference, the acknowledgement of differences, the rejection of differences, and the denial of differences, with acknowledgement being the ideal. Listed below are some criteria for each. Insistence. All problems are blamed on adoption. There is a great deal of emphasis between biological and adopted children, and those adopted children are considered the bad seed, or seen as the bad seed. Assumption. Parents want gratitude. They bring up adoption negatively and unnecessarily. Acknowledgement. Adoption is seen as one of the factors in family problems. Family members have special sensitivities about adoption. Rejection. Parents admit, yes, there is a difference, but they want to forget it. They forget that the child feels the difference and needs permission to voice their feelings. Denial. Have not told child of adoption, and there is a big secret in the family. Never. That's a no-no. Don't do that. That is problematic. It's super problematic. Children's resistance to talking about adoption. Resistance to talking about adoption does not always come from the adoptive parents, just as it is often difficult for adolescents to discuss sex with their parents. It is also difficult for adoptees to talk with their parents about adoption. There is a myth that the failure to talk about these sensitive subjects is the fault of the parents. While it is true that there is sometimes a resistance on the part of the parents to discuss these topics, sometimes the resistance comes from the child. This needs to be acknowledged. So if your child does not want to talk about it and you've been open, that is okay. You need to follow your child's lead. That does happen. Sometimes it could be temporary, sometimes it could be long term. As long as you are following the child's need and you are understanding that what the child needs and is communicating to you. It can sometimes be difficult for parents to locate the fine line between allowing children to talk about adoption and insisting that they do. Parents have told me that they have opened up the conversation and tried to elaborate upon something which their son or daughter has said, only to be faced with silence. They say that it is their children who often do not want to talk about adoption. In this case, it is important to be sensitive to the child's wishes, but at the same time to try to discover what aspect of talking about adoption bothers them. Children, even those whose parents seem to be open about it, often think that they are going to hurt their parents' feelings. Oh, yes, that is so true. We coddle, we cradle, we try to protect our adoptive parents as much as our first parents, and we are stuck in between, so we mask those feelings and we don't want to talk about it, and it is very hard. It is very hard, and if we do talk about it, sometimes it's in a very sensitive matter. And like, I will tell you guys, even I do this now. Like, I made a post earlier on my Facebook page, and I was very sensitive to both my biological and my adoptive parents. But I needed to say something, and I said it in a way that I felt was comfortable enough that didn't target each one of them, but also made aware that I have a voice and that I need to be heard, which we should be. Anyway, if they discuss how they are really feeling, other children are in denial themselves about the fact that they are adopted, because it brings up the "before I was wanted by you, I was unwanted by someone else" feeling. Yeah, the abandonment. Parents need to be open, patient, and sensitive. Games and playtime. Sometimes it is helpful to play fantasy games. Find out what the child's monsters are. Children will often communicate their feelings if they can do so under the guise of a game. Puppets are usually effective for this purpose. The Ungame, it's a board game. I actually have it, believe it or not. Ironically, I learned about this game from my adoptive mom. She didn't play it with me, but she had it because she's a social worker, so she got it for her kids. I played it once or twice, but it really is a really good game to talk about feelings, as long as the participants are honest in the way they play. So yeah, I actually do recommend that game. Funny enough, I do have it. Not intentionally. I didn't intentionally buy it for adoption, but we do actually own it. Sorry, had to laugh out loud on that. Feelings should never be criticized or judged. Having a sandbox with different kinds of figures, animals, edifices, vegetation, and so forth can also be an excellent medium in which the child can work out some of their problems, as many child therapists know. So basically, like a sensory box. I guess they called it different things back then. I mean, again, this book was written in the 90s, so this is what we do now. They are called sensory boxes. You can bring in things, different things. They're good for so many different reasons. Never thought about it for this, but it does make sense. We do use it as a sensory play. or we were using it as a sensory play to help with things. But yes, I'm going to continue reading this because this makes so much sense. Um, Observing the child at play can often give clues to their anxiety. Although, as Marion Barnes has said, most parents do not have the necessary understanding of the ego and the mechanisms of defense to help their children work through their anxieties. A therapist trained in adoption issues can help the parents interpret what is going on and give advice as to how best support the child as they work through their feelings. A child at play knows what they need to do and will do it if left to their own devices. Parents should not direct a child's play or become concerned that they are not playing with the educational toys. All play is educational in the sense that it is a means whereby a child can work through their feelings. I would recommend that all parents read an article by Bruno Bettelheim entitled The Importance of Play, which appeared in the March 1987 edition of The Atlantic Monthly. It is an excellent article by a man who understood children very well. Too much organization of a child's time can inherit this very important work. This is also true of adolescents who need some alone time. So this is something that I do as a parent, especially as a homeschooling parent. Like right now, as I'm working, my little one is, I think he's playing Minecraft and he's watching a show. It's fine. Like, we did our learning. He's good. And this way I can come in here. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. I get alone time. And so he recognizes that he needs that sometimes. Sometimes he needs it. Sometimes you need space, and that is okay. And that is something we do in our home where if you need alone time, if I need alone time, I say, hey, buddy, I need some alone time. I will be with you in 5 minutes, or I'll be with you in 10 minutes. And he will set a timer, unless it's like some emergency. He's pretty good about it. He's not like tiny anymore. But that is something that we do. I try to wait until he is asleep, although he has sleep issues, but that is something that's super important. Playing alone is not a bad thing. Also, playing with friends is not a bad thing. If you have a child, we were actually talking about this today. If you have a child, you obviously want them to have friends, right? Same thing goes with adoptive children. You want children who are adopted to be surrounding them. They can work out their issues. They can talk about it. I think that is why, for me, being in the 1%, it was easier for me to talk about and be out of the fog and discuss this with my parents because they provided all that for me. They were able to overcome their own insecurities, and they were able to say, hey, this is what she truly needs. We are going to provide that for her. Whereas many other people don't do that for their adoptive children. Okay. Art, poetry, music, and dance. Many adopted children, perhaps especially those who are more withdrawn in other ways, are very creative. Ooh, that was me. Very so much so. The products of their creativity can often contain clues of their true feelings. If it is not intrusive, it can be helpful to observe an adoptee's artwork, stories, poems, and other creative endeavors. A parent has to be able to understand the symbolism involved because the child is seldom aware of what they are saying. This can provide valuable clues as to what is going on inside the child because art and poetry often come from the unconscious. It is important that the parents can be accepting and understanding about whatever it is that they discover. If they feel rejected or angry because they see a picture of a child killing their parents, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, they would do well to try to understand their own feelings and not criticize the child. They may only be trying to work out their feelings of having been killed, or may have fantasies about the adoptive parents having stolen them from their birth family, which is preferable in their mind to thinking that their mother gave them away. Okay, so the thing about the killing, and the reason I laughed in such a sense, is that adoptees are 15% more likely to become serial killers targeting their adoptive parents, which I do point out in the next book we will be reading. But that is a very true thing. And if we can't work this out through therapy and healing and all of that, that is something that comes to mind. So, something that I spoke about with my own therapist, not to scare you, I'm not going that way, I promise you guys. But there is a book that I am working on with fellow adoptees where we can basically act out these scenarios through a book where we write what we need to and it gets off our plate. And that helps in the sense that obviously we're not doing it in person, right? Like we're not actively going out to harm people, but it allows us to be able to kill the trope of certain adoptive parents and adoptees and get over that. We're in the process of healing, and that's going to work out for us. Now, my therapist was not concerned. I'm just letting you know. She was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense because it's like play therapy, right? It's like you're acting out what you need to without doing it in person and actually harming people." And so she was totally on board with it. I know that might scare some people, but for us, this is the reality of what we go through. And we're like, we actually want to bring this to light in some ways. It's going to be fictional, but these are tropes that adoptees already deal with, either as there's like adoptee tropes and there's also adoptive parent tropes. And so we are really going to be playing to those core, and it makes sense to us, right? But we're not doing it in person. We're not like going out and actively harming people. It's just that's something that we have to deal with, and this is our creative mode for getting it out. I will let you guys know more when it comes out. We are just beginning to like plan this, but yeah, it's just something that's been on my mind that I'm like, I really want to write something that's fictional, but also plays up all of these things that we deal with and really covers our emotions. Anyway, music can offer children a means by which they can express feelings or moods. I love using music for this. Composing their own music or interpreting other people's compositions afford a child a wide range of expression. Parents can observe or hear if a child composes or prefers to play or sing compositions in major or minor keys, fast or slow tempos, and so forth. Again, no comment is called for, although an acknowledgement of the mood of the piece, such as, "That song makes me feel sad. Is that how it makes you feel?" may make the child more aware of their own feelings. Dance or movement is another means by which parents can get to know the inner lives of their children. Children love to dance, and the ways in which they move their bodies are often metaphors for how they feel. For instance, I have observed adopted children who vehemently throwing themselves during dancing or playing activities. They also throw things. When one works with the meaning behind this form of expression, one can discover that the child is acting out over and over again. The feelings have been thrown away. I am grateful for Susie Biderman, a dance and movement therapist from New York, for demonstrating that she helped one little boy work through the trauma to the point of being able to have compassion for that little baby inside himself. The parents should not question the child about what he is doing or try to correct his fantasies or their fantasies. They are trying to work out that out for themselves. Parents who experience difficulty with their child's feelings, as symbolized in their creative endeavors, need to seek therapy or support to work out their own feelings of rejection and betrayal. They too have the right to their feelings. But there's often more to those feelings than what is going on in the immediate situation, and they may want to explore this. So yes, I'm going to say adoptive parents have the right to have their feelings. Everyone is valid in their feelings. However, being an adoptive parent means that you have to sometimes, well, I shouldn't say sometimes, you always need to work through those feelings, because at the end of the day, you benefited from the system and there is loss for that child. I'm not saying that child can't be grateful. I'm not saying that child can't eventually be happy or be close to you. All of that can truly happen. But adoptive parents truly need to work on themselves as well. So do first parents and so do adoptees. But adoptive parents, as a parent, have the job to listen to what their child truly needs. And that is not done often enough. Okay. One can gain a better understanding of a child by observing their means of creative expression. The child must be allowed to express themselves freely without criticism. If they feel criticized for their endeavors, they will stop doing this very important work or stop leaving it where they can find it. Parents should look upon their work a record of their pain and an effort toward the wholeness with openness, compassion, and understanding. Separation anxiety. One of the themes which comes up for adoptees in their play and artistic endeavors is that of being lost, forgotten, or neglected. Children who have already experienced the loss of their birth mother will find it difficult to be separated from their adoptive mothers. Daycare or school is often a source of apprehension for adoptees because it means being separated from the mother. That was something that I dealt with. This is often exasperated because of the difficulty many adoptees have with the academic process. If psychosomatic illness has not been evident until now, it may begin at this time. Stomach aches, often with accompanying diarrhea, can be brought on by new situations. At such times, it is important to remember that the symptoms are real, they truly are, even though the cause may be psychological rather than organic. So this is something that I talked about in a different chapter, but this is what I went through. I had those stomach aches all the time. And I went to the doctor, and surprisingly, the doctor never diagnosed me with anxiety, nor did my mother. She is a social worker. I'm not saying she should have diagnosed me, but we never sought out that diagnosis. But that is something that I dealt with, and I remember it to this day. I remember going to the nurse's office so often because I would have that stomach aches, and I remember it. I was anxious. I was worried. What if she didn't come get me? What if this? What if that? And I was a child who loved school. I was the child who, my trauma response was people pleasing. I did really well in school. I begged for homework. Yes, even in grades where homework was not a thing, believe it or not, I read every single book in the school. I mean, you talk about going above and beyond, that was me. And now I'm looking back and I'm like, who was I? What was that meant to be me? I didn't feel. Wow, I'm trying not to cry, guys, thinking back on this. I didn't feel accepted. Not so much by my parents, they did, but mostly by my peers. And that's hard to look back on. And that happened elementary, middle, and high school. I mean, I did have friends. Don't get me wrong, I had friends, but it just didn't feel like they were truly friends. They didn't get me. They didn't understand. And I think I was just so deep in my trauma response that it was hard to lift out of. And I thought everyone would be proud of me. And I really just got made fun of because of it. And it's awful and brutal. And that's a whole other trauma. Let's be real. Being bullied is a whole other trauma, but it happens. And it's something that I'm still dealing with, even though I'm 30 and 12 years out of high school. Wow. Has it been that long? 14 years. Wow. Y'all, I'm old. 14 years out of high school? Jeez. Anywho. Guys, I'm old. Anyway, let's not think about that. That's making me sad. Let's move on. It might be helpful to talk to the child to say something like, "Something's bothering you, isn't it, Susan? Can you tell me more about it or draw me a picture about it?" Even if the child can't immediately respond, an acknowledgement of her pain in a gentle tone of voice can begin to alleviate some of the tension and leave the door open for more communication in the future. Stuttering and skin disorders are more difficult to address without professional help. It should be noted that parents should not assume that the child is suffering from a psychosomatic problem. Physical symptoms need to be checked out by a physician. With or without accompanying physical symptoms, a child, when separated from their adoptive mother for the first time, is very likely to experience a great deal of anxiety on both a physical and an emotional level. They will be reminded, although most likely unconsciously, of that first separation. It is very important that the adoptive parents avoid being late in picking up their children after school or other activities, and to write them often when they are away at camp. This is not treating them like babies. It is an attempt to lower the anxiety level of children for whom separation is tremendously frightening experience because of their memory of that first devastating loss. Over and over again, they need to be assured that someone understands the loss and the ease with which the fear of it is happening again and can be triggered. So, I don't remember my response as a child. I mean, I had a nanny. My mom did work when I was a baby, and my father obviously worked. And, like, I remember school as well. But I do remember for the camp thing. Now, I was 11 when I first went away to summer camp. And it was weeks at a time, like it was a week at a time. So they would drop me off Sunday and they would pick me up Friday. I would get letters, things like that. But I remember that first year or that first 2 years, I did not handle it well. I didn't. And I was scared. Now, I had tons of sleepovers. I slept over at friends' houses. I slept over at my cousins' houses. I had no issues with that. Like, I think I was just familiar with those specific people. And so I had a better understanding, and I knew that if I called, they would always answer. If I needed them, they'd come pick me up. That didn't really happen. Like, I was fine. But, like, they were always there. Whereas camp, it was different. Like, you couldn't call, really. You weren't really supposed to, and you weren't supposed to be picked up early. It was just a whole thing, and I will say I struggled those first few years. The next few years, I did have to be picked up. I think once. I want to say I had to be picked up once a week during those years, just because I did have to have allergy shots, and I couldn't miss a week. So I had to be picked up. So I would get like an hour with my mom. I'd get my allergy shot, and then she'd bring me back, and that wasn't a problem. Um, and I was able to handle things better. I also had like two best friends at that time. I had my favorite counselors. In fact, I'm still in contact with all of them. Um, and like I miss camp life. I will say that. I became a camp counselor. I hope one day my kiddo will go to that camp. I think it's an amazing camp. But it is definitely something that I remember going through and feeling that fear of abandonment again, that fear of loss. Um, and it took me a few years at camp to like realize they're still going to be there. And it's funny because my neighbor who, if you guys don't know, I did move. I am now not where I grew up for majority of my childhood. We spent our summers and our winters here. Not the school year, like not the school days, but every time we got a break, we were at this house. And my neighbor was like, "Oh, it's only if you cross the river, it's only 4 miles up. Like it's not a big deal. You're not that far from home. It's a 12-mile drive, but if you actually were walking, it's like 4 miles." Um, and he's like, like you're not that far. Like if you need to get away, you can get away. It's not that far. You're fine. Um, so I also remember that, and it's kind of funny. So anytime I needed to be reminded of that, I would look in that direction and be like, home is right there. Mom is not that far. And it was usually my mom because my dad was working during the summer, so he was even 3 hours away. He was in the city, and my mom was here. But I knew that she wasn't that far. I knew if anything, if my dad had to come up and get me, he would have done it. It would have taken longer, but he would have done it. So it's okay. We also have friends and neighbors and family members that could have gotten me too. So it wasn't like the biggest deal. But my point was, I keep rambling. It did take me a while, and I was a little bit older. I was, preteen. So yeah, a little bit about my childhood. Not that you guys needed, but anyway, moving on, because this is a very long video. The meaning of discipline. What about discipline? Even though we know that an adopted child is in a great deal of pain, they still need to have rules for behavior in order to take the place in the family and in society. It is important to teach a child about limits and boundaries for their own well-being. This is necessary for their relationship with their parents as well as for future relationships. It is also a very important source of the child's sense of security. Adopted children love routine and often act out when routine is interrupted, even if they look forward to new activities. Every new experience again rises the anxiety level. So I was probably, I don't know, I don't remember loving routine. I will tell you guys, even now as an adult, I kind of hate routine, but I kind of like it. I hate the mundane, 9 to 5 jobs. But if I have a little bit of leniency, where I told you guys, I homeschool, I work from home and I homeschool. So, for us right now, our schedule is kind of 2 to 6 is generally our homeschooling hours, both school, whether, he's working on his own or he's working with me, whatever, those hours are dedicated to homeschooling. And then the morning is usually my work related. After homeschooling, we'll do dinner. We'll kind of relax. Sometimes I'll go back to work. Sometimes I just chill, whatever. It depends on the day, right? But it's enough leniency for me to I'm not bored. I can get creative. But there's enough of a routine that it's not going to be completely off schedule, right? But the schedules where it's okay, we have to do this at 8 and that at 9 and that at 10. I hate those. I honestly hate those. So when I was working in a preschool, well, I didn't mind it as much because there were other people, there were kids, there's a little bit more creativity. I didn't enjoy that so much, especially in the late afternoon, where it ended up only being me for a good hour with 5 kids alone. That part I struggled. Not so much the kids, but just being the alone and being I kind of at a loss. I have to juggle everything, and I'm glad I'm no longer teaching. First, I prefer homeschooling instead of, teaching other kids. But it was definitely a struggle. And I guess there were worries because some of these parents came really late, and I was are they abandoning these kids? These kids have been here since 8 a.m. Literally 8 a.m. And they're here 6 o'clock. It's sometimes concerning. So, yeah. Anyway, one of the difficulties in disciplining an adopted child is in knowing what is actually going on. Sometimes a behavior does not seem to have much to do with the stimulus preceding it. Parents should watch for exaggerated behavioral responses to stimuli. For instance, an adopted child has low frustration tolerance and will often kick, scream, or cry when unable to do a task easily. Ask yourself if this behavior is appropriate to the situation, or is it out of proportion to what is currently going on? This is a good question to apply to ourselves as well as our children. If the behavior seems out of proportion to the situation, it may be a reaction to an old feeling which was triggered by a recent event. This is true. Sometimes you allow things to boil up and then it gets too big and then you just leash out. And I know I definitely do that. Where it may not necessarily be the task, but it's the feelings behind the task where you're frustrated or angry, and it's just a reoccurring issue. Anyway, allow the child to calm down and then talk about what they are feeling, about what they felt was wrong. So, trying to talk to a child while the child is agitated state will only result in the parent and child getting into an argument, which with each other becoming defensive and even more angry. Let them know that you realize that they are upset and that you are interested in what it was that upset them. It is not easy to get at the real stimulus, which what the button was pushed to make them, react, because the child is usually unaware of it themselves. They may be absolutely sure that their behavior was justified. Remember that because of their early victimization and manipulation, adoptees sometimes feel persecuted by the least thing and will lash out at the parents for the confusion and chaos they feel inside. What the parents need to watch out for is their own responses to their child's behavior. What button of their own unresolved conflicts did they push? Is their wish to punish a result of their own feelings of rejection? These feelings might be normal and understandable, but they should not be acted upon. It is amazing that parents often expect a level of restraint from their children which they are not capable of demonstrating themselves. When parents react from their own inner child, they cannot effectively parent. They should do this inner child work in their own therapy. Yes. In their relationships with their children, they should set an example of self-control and should demonstrate understanding and fairness towards the children. This is not an easy thing to accomplish, especially in the case of extreme testing out behavior, but it is a goal to strive for. So yes, especially because I feel like we've mentioned this before with this book, but the testing out behavior is not only so testing out behavior is very common for children. We know that they like to test boundaries. They want to see what they can get away with, what they can't, and how you're going to react to it. With adoptive children, that still happens, but it might happen at a higher frequency, or it might happen later at life. And it's more of a trauma response, like, how are you going to react? Are you going to send me away? How much can I get away with? And it is different for those that of biological children. There's more to it. So definitely something to look out for. After trying to be as careful and aware as possible about what might be going on, the parents then have to teach the child that regardless of their reasons, their behavior has consequences. The key here is teach. To discipline means to teach, not to punish. The method of disciplining should be appropriate to the behavior, not punitive. This can be very difficult to adhere with acting out children because they push and push until parents are often at their wits' end and will do almost anything to stop their behavior. This only serves to reinforce the vision of themselves as a bad person, which then serves as stimulus for even more intolerable behavior, with both parent and child feeling inadequate and rejected. So this is something that my own child has brought up to me. Again, not adopted. He is not adopted. He is my biological child. But he asked me a few days ago, am I a bad kid? And now my kid does not act out. Like, he very few times is his behavior warranting for a punishment. And I mean really rare, like not even once a year. He's really amazing. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he's quite amazing. And I was like, no, like, it was your behavior. Like, you didn't listen. You didn't do what you were asked. And he had a lot of leniency at that point. And I said, at this point, you have broken the house rules. And mommy is tired of telling you so. So the punishment is X, Y, and Z. Once you do this, then we can come back and fix the situation. But it wasn't your behavior. It wasn't you that's bad. It was your behavior that was bad. And basically, I just try to explain that you are in control of your behavior, but that does not mean you are a bad person because your behavior can change. You are in control of it. And I want to make that clear. You as a person are only in control of yourself, of that behavior. Now, as a parent, yes, we are supposed to teach and discipline and all that, but we have to guide them. We can't fully control them. They have to be independent and learn that, even as young children. And I think that's where a lot of parents do struggle with, but I just want to make it clear that is something in the way that I explained it that was explained to me when I was a child from my adoptive parents. And I think that really helped because I knew I wasn't a bad kid. I knew I wasn't. They might remind me that I acted out sometimes because that's what children do, but I was not a bad kid. They also praise my son because he is quite amazing, and he really doesn't act out as much as normal kids do, which sometimes concerns me, but that's a whole other issue. Anyway, younger children sometimes just need time to cool off. So true. Going for a walk, giving them time alone, letting them just, timeouts are kind of like that. We do time ins where I just sit with him and we just breathe together, we hug it out, we cry it out, whatever needs to happen, and then we can talk about it. But it depends on what the situation is. So I want to make that clear because let me read on. The presence of a mother at times when the child seems out of control will create even more tension and less control. Sending a child to their room with the door open might help, especially if there is a rocking horse, wonder horse, or rocking chair in the room. I recommend leaving the door open so the child will not feel isolated and abandoned. Any rocking motion is soothing and often calms the child down quickly. After the child has calmed down, follow through a talk. It is important to first affirm the child's feelings of helplessness and being out of control. Then proceed to ascertain what was going on. Recognizing and acknowledging an adoptee's feelings is prerequisite to any further process with them. They are confused and scared in their own feelings and need to be assured that those feelings are legitimate, but that the behavior was unacceptable. For parents of children who find it difficult to accept either love or discipline, I would recommend a book called The 1-Minute Scolding or Who's the Boss by Gerald Nelson. It describes an effective method of conveying both love and discipline to a child without parent and child ending up in frustration and anger. Because Nelson's method takes time to learn effectively, and because children often respond negatively at first, many parents give up on this method before they perfect it or before the child begins to respond in a positive way. It is important to remember, especially with children who are afraid to allow much affection, that their overt response is not necessarily what is going on inside. Keep at it. Dr. Nelson's psychological reasoning is sound, especially as it pertains to the adopted child. Dr. Nelson's ideas are also valuable for the compliant acquisition child who is afraid to express their own feelings of anger for fear of being abandoned. Observing that their parents can be angry at them and still love them might begin to allow them to express their own anger about what happened to them. The withdrawn compliant child is very deceptive because they don't cause much trouble and therefore seems untroubled. Although they often seem affectionate, it might also be a good idea to notice how willing they are to express their own feelings to ascertain how real the feelings of affection actually are. Are they truly expressions of deep, secure love, or are they anxious response to fear of further abandonment? Parents often mistake clinginess for affection. Children who feel secure in their parents' love can more easily risk expressing negative feelings as well as positive feelings. No matter what the temperament of the child, whether acting out or compliant, parents should act towards him in a consistent, firm, and loving manner. Limits during adolescence. Being consistent, firm, and loving becomes more and more difficult as the child approaches adolescence. The testing out child becomes even more out of control at the very time that they want to and need more freedom. It is also at this time that some compliant children begin to act out more, as they come face to face with their identity crisis. Parents should be understanding, but must set definite limits for behavior. At the age when peer pressure is at its peak, the pressure to experiment with drugs, alcohol, and sex becomes overwhelming, compounded by the feeling held by many adoptees that they belong with the losers and stoners of life. The problems become magnified. The teenager has to be assured over and over again that the parents love them. But love includes discipline, and discipline means limits. They need to know that they will listen to their requests, but will stick to their convictions no matter what other parents are doing. An example of need to be fair and stick to convictions can be seen in the experience of a young woman named Janice. In speaking about her confusion growing up in a family where she was receiving many mixed messages, Janice said, my parents actually had good values and a sense of fairness, but they tended not to trust their own judgment. They often allowed me to do something which they didn't approve of simply because my friends' parents allowed them to. This became clear one day when I heard Mom talking to Gretchen's mom. All of a sudden, I realized that my parents' moral and ethical values could be challenged with one simple telephone conversation. Instead of feeling good about this, she ended up feeling confused and unsafe. In setting limits for their children, parents need to be fair and to take into consideration what is appropriate for teenagers at this time and place in history. Parental expectations about dress, hairstyles, language, or behavior should take into consideration the importance of the adolescent need for acceptance by peers. Rigid standards by parents which fail to take this into account will only invite rebellion and serve to make the child feel justified in breaking the rules when a teenager breaks a rule about one of these less important issues. It becomes easier to break the rules about more dangerous things, such as drugs and alcohol. Don't sweat the small stuff is a good rule for parents. If parents are fair, the child will appreciate their being strong and caring, even if they rail and push against the boundaries which they have set. Don't expect the gratitude, though, for at least another 20 years. That's true. Don't ever expect the gratitude. Ever. Whether you're biological or an adoptive parent, don't parent because you assume that your child will be grateful for you. Parent because you love and want to give them everything and look out for their well-being, like we talked about. If you do it well enough, they will be grateful for you. They will express that, but don't demand it of them. That is a problem. A common problem that adoptees often see from specifically adoptive parents and even from society telling us so. And it's disgusting. Anyway, sorry, ranting again. Okay. Again, Angela used to push furiously against the limits her parents set for her social relationships. Yet, she would be angered at the laxness demonstrated by many lame parents who don't care about their kids. Letting her parents know how she felt about these lame parents was her way of telling them that she appreciated their giving her a way to control what she was having difficulty controlling herself. I could always blame my bitchy mom for not letting me do something, which she knew to be inappropriate or dangerous, but she couldn't tell her friends that she didn't want to do. Limit setting becomes even more conflictual when it concerns an activity the child does want to take part in. Holding the line can seem like a monumental task for parents. Intimidation is the name of the game. Parents are called names, sworn at, told they are not the real parents. Yeah, we've done that. And made to feel totally unfair and inadequate. Sorry, guys. It's true. Adoptees will do it. Even if you are the best adoptive parent, it happens. And I feel a little guilt, but it's also a trauma response. So, yeah. Okay, like, I do actually feel guilty for doing it, but I'm also recognizing that it's a huge trauma response for us. And we do lash out, but if you continue to hold the line and be that boundary, we get that you love us and we understand it and we see it instead of just giving up on us. Anyway, sorry guys, I had to say it because I know I've done it and I feel guilty for that. Whew. Moving on. Some parents find the constant struggle for power too difficult and give up. Yet one can't give up because the stakes are too high. Parents need to be consistent, follow through with appropriate discipline, and also be willing to talk things over, listening to and acknowledging the child's feelings of frustration, hostility, and anger. Ultimately, fairness and consistency can result in the child's learning to set reasonable limits for himself and sticking to them in the face of peer pressure and other adversities. The first cardinal rule for adoptive parents, the one cardinal rule, no matter what the behavior, is to never threaten abandonment. No matter how hard the child pushes for it, it is not what they want. It is, however, what they expect. Though the child may bring you to your wit's end, restrain yourself from implying in any way that you will abandon them. Adoptive parents often feel inadequate, totally rejected as parents. Nothing they do seems enough. Those who turn to organizations such as Tough Love will be told that they have to tell their uncontrollable children to leave. Don't do that. No, 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 no. Anyway, I don't recommend this for the adopted children who are still minors, except as a very last resort, when all other avenues such as counseling or searching have been exhausted and the family living situation is absolutely intolerable for everyone concerned. I actually disagree with that. I don't think, if they are a minor, they should not be leaving your home unless there is abuse, like physical, like you are truly terrified that this child will stab you in your sleep, kind of scared. That is not a situation. If this was your biological child, you would do everything in your power to find help. Why don't you do it in the same manner for your adoptive child? Most of them don't do that. Again, sending them away is very harmful. Counseling will help, but being open to things will also help. Sorry, I'm just, people even rehome their kids, and that's gross. Anyway, in the case of extremely outrageous or dangerous behavior, perhaps distance and time will be the only means for the adoptee to get some perspective on what has been going on. Sending the child away to school or adolescent treatment center is a last resort, however. No, don't. Guys, I don't agree with this at all. If it does happen, it is important that the feelings of abandonment, loss, and rejection be explored. Yeah, because that's all you're doing again. Abandonment was the initial trauma. Parents do not want a reenactment of that trauma to be the undoing of a lifetime of commitment and love. What commitment and love? Like, honestly, if you're going to do that, you're not showing it. At the same point, of course, it is appropriate for a child to leave home, and for the adoptee, this very normal separation sometimes becomes problematic. As a young adult who may feel insecure in the love of their parents, the adoptee will find it frightening to leave home. For them, a separation in any relationship often seems traumatic. Even some young adults who have spent their entire adolescence threatened to leave find it difficult to actually do so. This problem becomes compounded by the parents' feelings of guilt about having to push the young adult out of the nest, because they may feel as if they are abandoning them. Adoptive parents sometimes allow their adult children to stay home long after it is appropriate for them to leave. Everything has its own season, and when it's time for a child to leave home, colluding with their own fears about it, doing so keeps the adoptee in a dependent position and reinforces their own feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness. Adoptive parents can acknowledge their child's fears, while at the same time insisting kindly and firmly that they leave and exercise their own autonomy. Sometimes it is the mother, rather than the child, who has difficulty with the child becoming independent and leaving home. Her own need to be needed or her emotional dependence on them takes precedence over their need for autonomy. She must look into her own issues of separation, loss, and self-esteem. The child needs their permission to leave. They need to know that they are there to help them if appropriate and possible, and that they should, at a certain time in their life, leave the nest. They need their parents' reassurance that leaving home is appropriate and healthy and not a rejection of them. Their readiness to leave the nest is a celebration of them coming to age and a vote of confidence by the parents in their ability to assume the responsibility of adulthood. And also know, like, if they leave, it's okay that they come back. There really should be nothing like holding them back. That is something that I did. And my own parents feel like I abandoned them because I left twice I did it without word, but and I did end up coming back, and now I'm here, but I take care of them. I help them around the house and take care of my own kid, and I couldn't do that. In today's economy, I can't be a single parent on my own without their help, unfortunately, between mental health, chronic health, I'm chronically ill, and just the way that everything is going. It's just, I appreciate everything that they've done for me, and I'm trying to do that back, but unless I had a partner or a roommate, that wouldn't happen, and I don't think that is right. That is the right thing to do right now, if that makes sense. Anyway, the 5 cardinal rules. Here is a summary list of the 5 cardinal rules for adoptive parents. They are not always easy to follow, but they are, in my opinion, essential to the well-being of the adopted child. Never threaten abandonment. It is what the child expects, no matter how hard they push for it. It is not what they want. In the short term, threatening abandonment seems like an effective behavior modifier, but in the long term, it only raises anxiety and fosters more acting out. This is also true for biological children, by the way. Do not do that. They will think that you don't love them. Don't do that. Never ever do that. Okay, continuing on. Acknowledge your child's feelings. Never say to your child, you shouldn't feel that way. Everyone has a right to their feelings. Feelings come from the unconsciousness. A person doesn't have to act out on their feelings and should take responsibility for their behavior. But feelings are what they are. They mean something and should be acknowledged and respected. Allow your child to be themselves, as fully as they are able to be. Withdraw expectations which are alien from their personality, proclivities, and talents, and value their uniqueness. Adoptive mothers, do not try to take the place of their birth mother. You are the child's real mother. I hate that. And she is the real biological mother, and you, the real nurturing mother. The child can love you both just as you can love more than one child. Yes, agree with that. I hate the word real because then it insinuates something is fake, but you're both real to the child and mean something, and it's not a competition. Don't make it a competition. As difficult as it is to acknowledge, you cannot take away your child's pain. They must work through it for themselves. What you can do is acknowledge their feelings and provide the means by which they can work through their pain. Truth. That's what we want. Acknowledgement. We want you guys to listen, and we appreciate when you do. It means more to us than you will ever understand. Anyway, this is the end of chapter 10. Chapter 11 will be posted shortly. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.